Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today with us, we're really lucky to have Justine with us, who's a fertility and career coach. And after her own journey, which we'll go into later, she founded the Hidden Trimester to provide coaching and support to women who are navigating some of the emotional challenges and struggles of this journey. And she's really focused on career coaching, empowering women, and just, yeah, really working with women one to one. So that's really nice. And I'm excited to hear a bit more about it. But firstly, yeah, welcome, Justine, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Jess. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. And I'd love to know a little bit just to start off and let the listeners know a little bit about your own journey and what kind of drove you to get into this space and how that happened.
Sure. So I guess I guess it all started in around like 2019
Mm.
when my husband and I decided, yes, we were ready to have a baby. We'd moved from Sydney to London about a year before. So we'd been in London for a while and we were like, yeah, we can have a baby here. And I remember so specifically having this conversation at Exmouth Market at one of the cafes and just deciding, that's what we were going to do. And how naive, now that I look back at it, to think all we needed to do was make a decision and stop contraception. But basically, what followed from there was about 3 years of fertility treatment. And yeah, it all started with ovulation induction, because when I stopped the pill, my period never came back. And this is something that, this is kind of where the health system I felt had let me down the first time because I'd gone to a GP about a year ago and said, look, we don't want to have children yet, but I feel like I should stop the pill. I've been on it for 15 years, just give my body a break and get ready for when we do decide to have children. And she was like, absolutely not. Don't worry about that. Stay on it right up until you want to have children. If anything, it makes you like extra fertile the month after you stop it. Obviously, that wasn't the case for us, because my period just never came back. So anyway, started doing ovulation induction, which basically is when they give you medication, either letrozole or Clomid, and this makes you ovulate. And so you spend that month kind of going in for scans to see that your follicles are growing, to see that your uterus lining is thickening, blood tests to see that your hormones are acting the correct way, and then to make sure you ovulate that month. So I did that more than I should, to be honest. So what happened was the pandemic started. My first doctor got called away to the NHS and stopped all of my treatment indefinitely. So, after a few months, I found another clinic around Harley Street, which were quite frankly not a great experience, very businesslike and clinical. And, all of the women there just felt like cattle just being run through this business. I never saw my doctor after the first meeting. I never had the same nurse. All my as a result of this confusion, like a lot of my records were lost. And so I ended up doing this ovulation induction cycle, which most everyone agrees you should never do more than 6 times because after 6 times it's, not proven to work. Some even
Mm.
say three. I ended up doing it 11 times because, my records kind of got slipped through the cracks a bit. So yeah, I failed. I was failing again and again and again. So by the time I was told by the next doctor that the only option was IVF, I burst into tears, because it had been a long journey already. But to be honest, starting IVF actually I felt like it gave me some power back because I was no longer relying on just my body that, I felt like was continually failing me, and which I had lost a lot of trust in. But actually now I had doctors on my side, I had the science on my side, it was taken out of my control a little bit. So, doing the injections every morning and every afternoon felt like I was making progress for once rather than just waiting and waiting and waiting. Um, so when that didn't work, the IVF, uh, that's when, you've done your egg collection, you've done your transfer, you do your pregnancy test, and when it comes up and it's just that one little line, which you've only ever seen for, 3 years by this point, it's one of the lowest moments of your life.
Mm.
Because despite what they tell you that each cycle is a 25% chance of success, you just assume that's going to be you. You'll be the
Mm.
25% because you've put so much time and effort into it. you've got the doctors working for you, you've spent all this money. So yeah, when you get to that point and it's kind of like the last treatment you can try and it's the end of the road, it's just a really tough time. And
Yeah,
I just remember,
completely.
yeah, I
Mm.
remember walking, we were in Kent away on the weekend and we were just walking around this beautiful countryside trail and I was just crying and crying and crying because
Oh,
it's
bless
just,
you.
you've kind of reached the end.
Mm.
So when we eventually went back and did it again, didn't work again. Again, it's just like if you've always envisaged being a mum or being a
Yeah.
parent, you've kind of now got 3 years of evidence that it's not going to happen, and it's really difficult.
Mm. Yeah, completely.
So, I mean, eventually we got our miracle baby the year after that. So we got our son, who's the best thing that's ever happened to us. But it was only when I went through it all a second time for a second baby that I realized how complex and challenging it is because even though this time we had a baby, we weren't in the pandemic anymore. It was still so soul crushing to, repeatedly try and fail to bring a child into the world that you so desperately desire. And I kept thinking, like, why is it so hard? Like, you already feel so inadequate almost as like a woman and a partner and a friend and a colleague during this time. So you feel even worse that you're finding it so hard and you just don't understand. But it's only as I've like spoken to more and more people and each new client that I meet, it continually reaffirms how challenging this journey is. And
Mm.
actually, some of the women going through it are some of the most courageous and the strongest women I know. But it was really clear that they didn't have the right support. So I decided to start my own business that was purely focused on providing support for the emotional toll of infertility. And I called it the hidden trimester because for some of us, definitely for me, it was the longest and the most challenging
Mm.
period on the road to becoming a mum. And
Mm.
despite this, it's also so hidden. So, it's
Mm.
one of the loneliest as well. So I just really felt passionate about helping others through it.
Yeah, no, I'm firstly so sorry to hear about that kind of struggle and like as you said, the emotional toll of that whole journey. But I'm so glad that even with that, you've created such a positive thing out of it and use that to help other people. I think it's so key in what you've said is like the hidden trimester is the fact that it can be so isolating and people feel like they're going at it alone. But as you mentioned, with with the IVF example, it's only 25% of cases where it's successful. So it's actually the majority of people that are going through this process that are really struggling and really having those horrible feelings I can only imagine of, yeah, not feeling adequate and things like that, which are obviously like shouldn't be feeling, but you can't help it when you're in that moment. So I think creating something where you can provide that support is just so necessary and also something that yeah so many people struggle with. So I think that's such a positive to come from what must have been a really difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I feel so fulfilled now that I can channel some of that into helping others for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And how does that kind of work with regards to navigating these emotions and of
Mm.
different women who you speak to and who are going through it? Do you see kind of similar themes coming up? Are there similar, or does it kind of look different? Like, how does this, yeah, how do you kind of see this
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, despite how unique everyone's paths are, the same themes do keep coming up.
Mm,
So you see that they're challenged mentally, emotionally, physically. Their relationships are impacted with their families and friends.
mm,
Their careers impacted. Their finances are obviously impacted. So it kind of touches every part of their life. And there's actually an often quoted research statistic that women going through infertility, they struggle with the same anxiety and depression levels as those who are going through cancer or heart disease or HIV. And
mm,
actually, the Fertility Network UK just released a study a couple of months ago that looked at how 41% of women struggling with infertility actually met the criteria for PTSD or complex PTSD. So it is really hard.
mm,
It's hard for a number of reasons. I think one is the grief component. So every single month, you're basically experiencing a new wave of grief because every
Yeah.
month is an opportunity to get pregnant, obviously. So this is whether you're trying naturally or whether you're trying with treatment. And lots of people think, well, you can't really grieve something you've never had, which is so untrue because you put so much effort each month into like having this baby and so much hope into the possibility of this baby. So when it doesn't work, you have lost something. You've lost a future baby and you've lost the opportunity to be a mum, basically, which I
Yeah.
think we can all agree are two significant losses. Um, and this is true whether you've had a miscarriage or whether you failed an embryo transfer or whether you have just had a negative pregnancy test. But unlike other forms of grief, which are, meant to get softer with time, this actually gets harder because with each new failure, obviously the grief, is getting harder to deal with. So on top of all of this, you're showing up to work, you're doing your presentations, you're going to the social engagements on the weekend
Yeah.
as if nothing has happened that week or even that morning sometimes. So you've got that component, but you've also got this like relentless which is really important not to underestimate because you've got like each month you've got two parts of the month. You've got your luteal phase, which is the first 2 weeks of your cycle, where you're constantly trying to monitor for ovulation. Then you've got the follicular phase, which is the second part of your cycle, where you are driving yourself crazy because you're analyzing every single symptom after this, because you've ovulated by this point.
Mm.
You're looking at every single symptom, trying to work out if it's pregnancy or your upcoming period, basically. So if you have bloating or you have cramps or you're feeling tired or you're feeling emotional or you get a headache or you get a pimple or you have sore boobs that month, you've kind of this is the cruelest part about it is you've convinced yourself it's one thing so that when your period eventually does come, and again, you've probably convinced yourself it's implantation bleeding, and then you've had to kind of accept that it's not that either.
Yeah.
It's kind of another month of hope that you've built up and that comes crashing down. Um, and even the days within it, you're each morning you're waking up, you're thinking you will spend the rest of the day thinking of all the things that you might be doing wrong. So, did I get enough sleep last night? Am I eating the right things?
Mm.
Should I go for a run or should I just do yoga today? What supplements should I take? Should I go to acupuncture? Should I try Chinese herbalist medicine?
Yeah.
And should I be drinking or should I spend more money on those tests that my friend told me about? Or, can I book that holiday for next month? Or can I say yes to that work presentation? You don't really ever know that either. So, yeah, a good friend of mine, I'll never forget, she explained it to me. She was like, you basically spend every 40 hours out of every 24-hour day thinking about what you're going through. So it's really really consuming,
Yeah.
especially for the woman, because you're kind of trying to work out why your body is what you believe is failing you. Even though we're getting more and more evidence that a lot of infertility is related to male factors. And
Mm.
actually, I got sent something today that was incredible in how much more we've learnt about male factor
Hmm.
um, infertility being the cause. But, as well as this, like I predominantly speak to women, but men are also struggling with it too. And if it's
Mm.
a hidden trimester for women, it's just as hidden for men who are, even less able to feel like they can go and seek support.
Mm.
So basically, you've got all these things that you're trying to think about, but the reason, I think the reason you're overthinking everything is the specialists don't even know what's happening. So they don't know what's happening, they don't know why it's happening, they don't know how to help you. So you're given this, such a wide range of advice that
Mm.
even someone who's like quite rational will it'll send you a little bit
Yeah.
crazy because you'll go to one doctor and they'll say, don't drink a drop of alcohol for the 3 months up until your transfer. And then you'll go to another doctor and he'll say, go and have a margarita on the beach. Just don't drink a whole bottle of whiskey. And then you'll go to a nutritionist and she'll say, stop all dairy. And I was eating like coconut yogurt for months. And then you'll go to a fertility clinic and they'll say, you need to drink 2 liters of milk a night, leading up to your transfer. So your doctor will often like completely disregard what your acupuncturist has just made you
Mm,
believe. And then like your nutritionist will completely disregard what your doctor's just told you. So, and even if you go to any doctor, they'll continually just say the majority of infertility is a black box
mm.
or unexplained, which is kind of a hopeless thing to be told as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, a counselor once pointed it out to me, and she was like, it's like your journey is very, you can describe it as being hopeless and helpless because you're constantly losing hope, but you're also like you don't know how to help yourself because you
Mm,
don't have the right answers, and there's so much uncertainty about what you're going through, which I thought was a really good way
yeah,
to sum it
completely.
up.
No, completely. It can definitely feel when you don't have an actionable kind of set list of things that you can do, it's so hard when, as you said, there's categories like unexplained infertility where it's just they just don't know. And it's so hard to kind of see what I feel like in this society as well, we very much want a solution and answer and thing that we can do to kind of make things better and get the outcomes we want. So
Exactly.
it's definitely hard, particularly in this kind of society. So I think, how do you kind of help people navigate as you kind of touched on a few of the themes of the longevity of it, the unknown of it, the stress of it? How do you, in your kind of coaching work, how do you help people navigate this when you don't know the end goal and how long it's going to take?
Yeah, so I guess this is where coaching is quite unique to the person that is going through it. So it's very all very well to say like what are some tips that everyone can take away when they're going through a journey. But actually it was when I kind of I I went through it for it to a few different therapies when I was going through the journey. It actually took me like 2 years to see anyone, which looking back seems crazy now. But it was only when I had a really transformational coaching experience that I
Mm,
realized the true value of coaching. So while it's, there's an important place for counseling, especially if you have like a particular mental health issue that you need someone qualified for, coaching can be so transformative in terms of giving you more agency in your life and giving you some of those future focused tools, changing your mindset,
mm,
making you more self-sufficient when it comes to dealing with life challenges. So I really wanted to create my particular coaching to be the emotional support pillar that sits in the gap that's left by your huge medical team because you have all these doctors and nurses and embryologists and gynecologists who are constantly talking to you about your physical issues and treatments,
mm,
that it's quite easy to lose another important part of yourself, which is, your heart and your mind. So
mm.
um, it's really about making sure you have the emotional strength to continue
Yeah.
on the journey as well, and also to lead a fulfilling life, regardless of what you're going through, because so often people put so much on hold in their effort to become a mum that they kind of stop living their lives, and that's not really benefiting anyone or, most importantly, ourselves. So I really work with each individual to understand them more, to increase their own self-awareness, and then to understand what are like the unique ways that we can help them.
Mm,
But generally, what I'll offer is validation first and foremost that what they're going through is really hard,
yeah.
and giving them a source of connection in what's often a very lonely time. And often they'll say to me, like, you're the only one, no matter how much I tell people about what I'm going through, you're the only one that really understands what
Mm,
it's like. But then importantly, giving them the tools to improve their mindset and their sense of control and helping them, approach it from a greater place of strength and
mm,
calm. And also, really importantly, to protect and nurture the relationships in their life, which
mm.
are more than often impacted when they're going through something like this.
Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about that part of things. So how the infertility journey, how you kind of help people with the impacting the relationships in their lives as well and kind of managing that part.
Yeah, sure. So, unfortunately, this is a big impact. Your relationships do suffer.
Mm,
So, whether it's your partner or your friends or your family or your colleagues, every one of my clients comes to me with a story of one of or many of their relationships being impacted. And this is where I get really passionate about the ways that I can help them because it is really easy to blame people for not really being there for you. But actually, there are some really impactful ways that you can instead open up lines of communication with them and help them help you because the people that love you, they want to know how to help you. They often just don't know how, or they don't even really understand that it's so hard in the first place. So, I guess there are a few reasons that your relationships struggle. The first is that there is still this residual social stigma around the topic. Like a lot of people still perceive it to be quite private or taboo. You've also got, secondly, people don't really understand the gravity of what people are going through or women are going through when they're going through this journey. And lastly, as society, we haven't really been shown examples of how to act towards someone struggling with it. So because it's
Mm.
been so taboo for so long, people haven't been socialized in how to respond. So they haven't seen the correct support behavior modeled like they have for people going through other major illnesses like, cancer, for example, or the loss of a loved one.
Mm.
We've all witnessed, and I'm sure you can like agree that we all understand the basic ways to show up for people who are going through other life challenges, whether it's sending a text message or calling them or baking something or sending flowers or attending a funeral or just, simply letting them cry and giving them a hug.
Mm.
But when it comes to infertility, there's not really those social models that exist to help them, to help people understand how they can support others.
Hmm.
And I remember even when my dad died, we got, I was so overwhelmed with all the support that we got. And we got all these flowers were sent to our house and people dropping in for tea, and my friends dropped everything. And I just remember feeling a little bit stunned because, at how significant this support was, even though I had actually failed an IVF transfer a week before, which I had found just as hard, if not, if I'm really honest, if I'd found harder and just kind of showed the real lack of understanding in how people, know to show up for people going through this.
Yeah.
And secondly, like when they do try and comfort you, they often lead into like toxic positivity, which is a mistake many of us will make when comforting people, but seems to be a little bit more prevalent in this space. So saying things like, anything that starts with the words at least, like at least you're, not pregnant, so you can drink champagne this weekend, or at least you can, sleep in on Saturday mornings because you don't have kids, or at least you have another embryo. And it, while coming from such a good place, it can be incredibly dismissive of what someone's going through. And yeah, even like one of what a few of my clients have talked about this as well, and I used to get it, like when you tell someone you're doing IVF and they're like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And it's like, if you've made the decision to do IVF, not only have you been through quite a bit of failure and loss to get there and are probably at rock bottom at that point, but there's no guarantee that it's an exciting result, just like any other medical treatment. So there's nothing exciting about it. And actually, there's probably just more loss and uncertainty coming along the way. So yeah, I guess women going through this are trying so hard to be positive already. They don't really need to be told to be more positive, and actually, they just need someone to validate what they're going through and say, I'm really sorry, that sounds really hard. And yeah, I even had a client on Friday who she just, yeah, you just feel this burden. And she talked about this burden of feeling like you're being really negative all the time. So you try not to talk about it too much, but actually, all you want is for someone to say, I'm really sorry, that's really tough. And then, you feel so much better.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I think that's definitely, I think even the way that you've explained that makes it so obvious that it's you shouldn't be saying those kind of toxic positivity kind of statements. But I think you can so easily see how people slip into that when they're trying
totally.
to keep it light and kind of brighten up the topic or try and help. So I think that's actually a really useful tip. And I wondered if you had any other tips for people who are perhaps with or near someone or have a colleague who's going through
Mm,
infertility, kind of tips for them to help them support them.
yeah. I mean, this is a really good question and it's a really simple answer. It's not rocket science. It's just about listening and then it's about checking in. So if someone has opened up to you about their fertility journey, it's usually because they need a little bit of support. I used to get told when I was talking about it, it feels like even in 5 years it's changed. Like even 5 years ago, it seemed to be harder to talk about it, but people would say, "Oh my gosh, you're being so brave. Like you're so brave that you're talking about it or that you're telling people what you're going through." And I was like, I'm not being like I just wanted to say I'm not being brave. Like I'm being selfish because I selfishly need a bit of support. So the first thing you can do is just listen, and give them the validation that they need and that they're probably craving and just say, you know what, I get that this is really hard and I'm really sorry. And then the second thing you can do, which is also easy, is just remember to check in. And it doesn't need to be a lot, but if you know that they have an egg collection coming up or they have a test result they're waiting on, or you just haven't heard from them in a while, just send them a text and say, look, just letting you know I'm here if you need me. And
Mm.
that's basically all you need to do because you don't really need to be afraid of bringing it up in conversation and reminding them that they're going through that. Like, I promise you, they've not forgotten about it. You're not going to remind them. And this is like all forms of grief. Like, people do get a little bit, they do feel uncomfortable bringing things up to others
Yeah.
who've been through something because they don't want to remind them that something terrible has happened to them. But it's like, I promise you, they've not forgotten, but actually, they'll be so touched that you're thinking of them.
Mm.
And you don't need to be, you don't need to be try and fix it and say things like at least and, be positive. You just need to show them understanding and sympathy, because saying something is better than nothing,
Yeah,
basically.
completely. And I think that stems back to what you were saying earlier about the topic itself being such a taboo and not spoken about quite so much. And I think people then are more afraid to even bring it up. But I think by normalizing the conversation and speaking about it as you're kind of promoting through your coaching means that people can then discuss it and then they can, it's not so much of a hidden trimester, as you say. It's more of something that is a difficult circumstance that people go through and is something that a lot of people go through. So I think that normalization aspect of it is so important.
Mhm. Exactly.
And I think, yeah, that's a really good strategy just for other people trying to looking at it from the outside and try and help those other people. And I think, yeah, you've given a great array even for people who are going through fertility struggles themselves as well. And I wanted to know if there's
Yeah.
anything else that you wanted to add to that or anything else that you wanted to mention.
I think the other thing is, if we think about times that you can also um, be there for people who are going through it. It's usually around pregnancy announcements as well. So this is a common one. I mean,
Mm.
your friends are also kind of in the same life stage as you. So obviously, pregnancy announcements and birthday parties and newborns are becoming a larger part of your life. Um, and while it's really tricky, um, this is always a really tricky subject. And whenever my clients bring it up, they always preface it with saying, I promise I'm really happy for my friends and I feel so guilty feeling like this. But those pregnancy announcements are universally so hard for
Mm.
anyone going through it, men or women. And while half of you is so happy for them, and you truly are, half of you is also just, it's such a blunt reminder of what you've
Yeah.
been through and how broken your body is. So it's not really about them, it's about you. But people often, if you, whatever tower of strength you've created that week can come crashing down when someone tells you that they're pregnant. Um, and even I spoke to another girl last week and she was like, she's finished her fertility journey. She's got 2 children and she still finds those moments really tough because it still brings up a lot of feelings for her. So that's another kind of key point where I like to work with my clients and help them understand that, it's okay that they're finding it hard, but also this is where if you are a friend of someone who's going through it, just send a text and give
Mm.
them a bit of warning, and just tell them that you understand it might be hard and just don't be offended if, I mean, they promise you half of them is really happy for you, but don't feel like, yeah, that they're angry at you. They're just struggling with something that's really hard, and it's a really hard time for them. So
Completely.
anything other thing I would add to it.
No,
Um,
completely about like opening up that space for them to feel their feelings and say how they're feeling and talk about it, I think is so important rather than just kind of trying to brush it under the carpet, I think, which so many people do try to do just because it's a difficult conversation and it's a difficult emotions to feel as the whole situation is. So I think that's
yeah,
yeah, a really useful, I think, tip and kind of strategy for people going through that.
yeah,
But I think that brings me to the end of my questions. And I just want to say, yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that at all? And thank you so, so much for coming on the show. I think this is really useful and really a really important conversation that needs to be had.
yeah. No, no worries. I think you can probably tell I can speak for hours about this, but as long as it's, as long as I think it's just beneficial to spread awareness.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm contactable by anyone if they want to know more. But I've really
Yes.
enjoyed being on here, so thanks for having me.
And all your socials will be below so people can have a look and yeah, get in touch with you. And yeah, I just want to say again, thank you so much, Justine, and have a lovely rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Jess.